Baseline.
There was a process called the combat estimate, which is a series of 7 questions you ask yourself to help you come up with an answer to a problem.
The baseline is designed to create an emotional response.
I've seen things you won't believe.
More human than human.
Make you question everything.
Like there, you were starting to talk to it using natural language. It's just a new interface.
So I think that's it's sort of an instance of Back to the Future, right? Because how we used to do things was we would talk to people face to face, and then we developed writing, and we had the ability to be able to send each other letters, and that was a convenient way of having a conversation over distance, and everybody adopted that technology. Books, pamphlets, scaling knowledge across the world, and this is simply another tool for doing that. Where we've got to now is that the technology has enabled us to bring that back to a human-like interface where you're talking to somebody, and those limitations around distance or how much knowledge is available have evaporated, because you've got a professor in your pocket who has access to all of the knowledge that's out there on the internet, and an ability to be able to talk to it, and an ability to be able to introduce other people into the conversation if you want to. So I think this is going to be the future of the user interface. Not that your laptop is going to go away, but when it comes to engaging with an app, certainly the option should be there for you to just ask the app to go and do what you want it to do, rather than have to navigate your way around a whole load of different tabs and buttons, unless it's inconvenient for you to talk to it. I came across the term AI slop the other day. Have you've encountered this? So that AI slop being the equivalent of email spam. So in a world where you literally can't believe your eyes anymore, because the tools are there to generate the video content and the audio content that normally would have been 100% reliable, because there is only one way of generating that, by filming someone doing something live. Now that has gone, I think trust and verification are going to become the sort of premium markers of the services that you use. And if you venture off into the internet and there are no controls out there, then you have to be very careful about what you're consuming and what you choose to believe.
I mean, I don't know what the world's going to become, because essentially if you have algorithms distributing everything on the spectrum of perspective and content, and then you watch that and it learns what you like and compounds you with that information, whether it's shocking or scary or whatever triggers some emotional reaction. Everybody's view on the world is going to be this dopamine, adrenaline, threatening, triggering digital window into content. It came up in a conversation last week. Cumbria, where I come from, people would sit round the TV and watch a program on a Saturday night. You Bet was one that we used to enjoy.
Well, so we're of the same era, right? So it's around the country at the time.
And then there'd be BBC News.
Yeah,
everybody watching a single pane, a single perspective. Whether you agree with or disagree with that, kind of irrelevant. That's what everybody's been exposed to. What you have now is an infinite spectrum of perspectives compounded by algorithms, which surely at a population level is going to create quite a lot of cracks.
Yeah, I think so. So back in the days of being gathered around the television set, the veracity of the information that you were consuming was on trust that the journalists behind the program, be it a news program or whatever else, had done their jobs properly, and the information that sat behind it was true, or at least if it wasn't true, then it was clearly labelled as being something else, entertainment. Now there is a lot of opinion and unverified information that's out there ready to be consumed in the moment that things happen. And so I think we have to adjust the way that we consume this information to just be very cautious about, like, is this information believable? Which is why I think, like, now that we're adding AI slop to email spam and general misinformation that's out there through any social media platform, along with a whole bunch of truth, by the way, you just have to be careful that you have decided to consume information from this source, and there might be crowdsourced opinions on whether that is true or not, or whether that's like a factual statement. But none of that, that takes time to generate. So if it's in the moment, you're going to have to be careful whether it's the truth or not the truth or something in between.
I see myself running around the house with a hammer and hitting everything that's got an internet connection on at some point in a panic. Did
Switch it all off, like have somebody stood by the server with a bucket of water.
Kill it all. That's it. Bucket of water, I'll sort it out. I always used to, when I was a child, people used to talk about the dialects. I remember the dialects in Doctor Who. And I remember my father always used to say, "Oh, there's an easy way." I said, "Oh, what's that when the dialects come
push it down the stairs?"
Oh, just push it down the stairs or run into a muddy field. That's the Cumbrian way to avoid technology taking over. Run into a muddy field.
But so that's just as an aside. I mean, I think that what you've
did you see the one with Apple Intelligence? It was spreading the whole. Is it Luigi Mangione had committed suicide? The guy who had shot the CEO of.
Oh no, I didn't see that.
Well, and the BBC must have seen that somewhere. Apple Intelligence had pushed it out to all the Apple products. Yeah. It was a completely fake manufactured story.
Yep.
Triggering views, triggering engagement. But it was completely false.
Yeah, and what news organisation would want that falsehood on their reputation? Right, so slower, more steady news that the time has been taken to verify the truthfulness of it, I think, is going to become a premium, while people indulge, their dopamine hits of looking at all of the scurrilous stuff that's out there in the moment. Going back to your father's very astute observation that a Dalek couldn't follow you into a muddy field, I think we do have to remember, right, that like all of this technology, machine learning, generative AI, exists in a different space. So it is abstracted away from the material real world that we're in. And that layer of abstraction sits within the silicon on your computer or in the servers and everything else. So there is and this is where we start start thinking about how dangerous are these things going to be in the future. And there is a big gap between, like, saying something online and having an influence and an impact in the real world in a real physical sense. And I think we're quite a long way away from getting to that stage. I mean, there's really interesting work being done about how you would combine robotics technology with large language models and the sorts of things that we just saw there with OpenAI's model. But we're still progressing at it's progressing quite quickly, but I don't think we're going to see robots wandering around on the streets in the next couple of years or so. And that's that connection with the physical reality, the physical reality of the world, which I think will be a step change in capability.
I think this is a really interesting point. So if we imagine we exist within the built world, the physical world, you and I sitting here now, the reality of that world, and a digital world, what we see through our screens, our devices, our TVs, all of the digital systems that connect to internet services. If people look at their phone and see how many hours they spend in the digital world, I know, I was looking at some statistics on it. In younger people, 7 to 8 hours on a screen time a day. If you're awake for 14 hours, 50% of their existence is within the digital world. So, this idea of bullying or, influence, friendships, relationships, financial services, they're transitioning quickly to the digital world.
Yeah, you are right. Yeah.
So and if that continues generationally, it presents a problem to me, because in the real world, you can run into the muddy field, in the digital world, how do you get away from that pressure, that ongoing structure? Do you know?
Yeah. So it would be wrong to say that the digital world doesn't have an impact on everyday existence, right? The reason it exists in the first place is because we want it to save us time, add convenience. If your bank account was drained of all of its cash, that would have an immediate impact in the material world. Cyberbullying, in children and young adults, definitely has a physical impact on their mental well-being. It would be wrong to think that it didn't. But it's simply disconnecting it. You can step away from these things. But then, going back to the core point that I was struggling towards is in the development of these systems, I think there is a step change that we would need to go through where there is an ability to interact with the material world, whether that, it's one of the Boston Dynamics dogs or one of those, you've seen the videos of the humanoid robots making their way over an assault course and everything else. Maybe not those, I'm sure that they're coming, but if it was a AI assistant in a research lab, for example, having access to the robots that pick up the test tubes and do the titration and all of that kind of stuff, so it can run its own experiments. I think when we start getting to that stage and level of sophistication, where you could describe an experiment to a genuinely agentic system, so it understands the intent of the experiment, can decompose it into a series of tasks, and then can interact with the physical world in order to carry out the experiment to get the results, and then infer the conclusions from that experiment itself. I mean, that's quite compelling. I don't think we've crossed that threshold yet.
That could be one of the best explanations of agentic AI I've heard. You're approaching it with. It felt to me like you're approaching it with a discipline. A formal discipline. Does that come from your history of approaching work tasks, maybe your military background, or is this something you've evolved?
Well, I mean, we're all victims of our own experiences, aren't we? So
Benefactors,
very good. I think from a military perspective, there was a process called the combat estimate, which is a series of 7 questions you ask yourself to help you come up with an answer to a problem within the context of the intent that you've been given by your superiors and your superior. So, given the latitude to being told what to do, but not how to do it. So you have an ability to get on and use the resources in front of you to achieve an outcome and to generate a plan yourself does lead to that discipline of how to break a task down. The way that I look at agentic workflows is to break it down into something called LUDA, which is listen, understand, decide, and then act. And actually that's a derivation of something called the OODA loop, which I think was developed in the 50s, looking at the way that fighter pilots make their decisions in aerial combat. So OODA stands for observe, orientate, decide, and act. And the observation was that pilots go through that loop continuously to put themselves in the context, so observe, go through the cognitive process of understanding what that meant, make a decision on the options that were available to it, and then act on those decisions in order to move the aircraft around, to get to the objective that they wanted to be able to do. And then you move through that cycle really quickly. In military terms, we would always talk about getting inside the enemy's OODA loop. So can we go through that decision-making cycle more quickly? So I think that applies to agentic workflows.
I understand. If you have 2 combatants who are going through a similar process, if you can do it quicker, you're going to be able to make the move before they make it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's where this idea of listen, understand, decide, and act came from, certainly from my perspective. I was in that disappointing position where I thought I'd come up with a brilliant idea, but then you see it emerge in several places at the same time, and everyone else has thought of it as well. But I think it's a really good framework in which to think about how do we use large language models to do something material for customers who've chatting to the chatbot and want to get something done. And those something dones are going to be, give me some information. You've got my data. I'd like to essentially chat with my data so I can get the information and the insight from it. Or I want you to go and do something for me. I've forgotten my password, or I'd like you to go and fetch my balance, or I'd like you to move some money around, or whatever the intent would be. So the first part of the process, listen. You then need to understand what that intent is. So intent recognition becomes really important. And I think large language models have really represented a step change in our ability to understand what people have said. Once you've correctly identified the intent, we then need to go away and understand what the options are. What levers do we need to pull? And then acting, which is once we've made the decision, what's the appropriate automation that we need to go and connect to in order to kick off that business process, start that customer journey, go and fetch that information and bring it back and present it to the user. So yeah, thank you for that. I think it's a fairly straightforward, well understood, trodden path of how you interact with the world. What we're doing is thinking of agents and your interface into that world as like being an assistant, and therefore would behave in a more human-like way. We are driving towards more human-like interactions, which is actually the start of our conversation, which is, it's back to the future, isn't it? So talking, giving the other person the information, describing your intent, and then, taking the actions forward from there.
Your perspective has this foundation in the pragmatic application of the technology.
Yeah.
Like the people we've spoke to are in development labs, building machine learning, data science algorithms. Then, and then there's the customer on the end of a phone trying to fix a problem. You're in this middle. When we think about bringing machine learning, conversational AI to the customer, you're building this system in the middle. One of the frustrations for me has been their inability to remember.
Conversational memory.
How close are we to, in your experience in financial services or anywhere, to starting to build memory into these? So customers, when they re-engage, it's not a reset, it's a organic flow of engagements.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. And I think creating a deeper, more reliable memory of conversations is something that will unlock more difficult use cases and like customer journeys. So imagine my first mortgage, for example, where you might be engaging in a chatbot conversation that takes a number of weeks to get done, in which case you would definitely want it to remember the details of the conversation. Or indeed, if you'd engaged with the chatbot and then taken the conversation to a live agent over the phone that had then encompassed a conversation with a colleague who's working in the branch. Well, all of that information is relating to the same subject. It's all part of the same conversations. So, as an organisation providing a service to a customer, you'd want to remember all of those things agnostic of a digital channel. So I think the answer to your question is, I think it's definitely technically possible to bring together all of the unstructured data, the utterances, the interactions in the chats, the transcripts of phone conversations, the notes that agents have provided, the emails, the documents, the interactions with the user interface. So what's been transmitted over clickstream to show what the customer has done, how they've interacted with the app, then what they've said and who they've said it to, and put that all in one place so that there is a memory of those conversations so that you don't have to repeat yourself the next time you come in. So having that as a centralized store is one way of doing it. And that, I think, is the best way to do it at scale. A shorter term, more immediate way of doing it, and I think this is, would probably be pretty straightforward if we were minded to deploy some of the larger language models that exist at the moment, is the context window is quite large now. So you could retain, the last 30,000 characters of a conversation as part of an immediate short-term memory, and that's probably small enough to be held on a device as well. So I think remembering short-term conversations is like pretty straightforward and doable now. And the question of a longer-term memory that stitches together all of those digital channels is certainly technically feasible. We just need to go ahead and do it.
When I think about this conversational memory, I believe you could build systems, using AI and machines to actually create joy in human beings.
Yeah.
Actual joy,
surprise and delight, or
just joy. I think joy comes in a lot of ways from the removal of anxiety in the built world.
Yeah.
I think for parking is an example. For me, I don't know why I find parking so stressful. I've got a van, it's high.
Yeah.
I parked in over Paddington today, and it was amazing. And I found this amazing car park. I don't want to tell anybody about it.
It's too late. This is a podcast.
Oh yeah, well.
Just edit that bit out. No one will notice.
A lot of our listeners are in London, fortunately. I don't know where they are. They're probably just digital bots. But this idea that rather than every time I have to go on to this app and do the same thing and do the thing, it's like you're driving into London. I've booked the car park for you. What? How have you done that? Have you booked the right one? Yeah, it's the one there with the high thing. I know your specific set of requirements. I have memory. I've seen that you've done. And I'm like, wow,
a positive application.
It's that joy where the technology exceeds your expectation.
Yeah.
And I think ChatGPT have done that very well. I think they're plateauing.
Yeah.
But I think that initial engagement with an LLM-based system that actually has human elements built into it, which we know are trained. They're trained in the language model.
Yeah. Reinforcement learning through human feedback. I would disagree with you. I'd say maybe not the technology is plateauing, but our expectations of it are now coming into line with what they're able to do. There's an interesting essay that was written by the CEO of Anthropic.
I'm on ChatGPT right now.
You're on there right now. Machines of Loving Grace.
Dario Amodei,
yeah. So Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic.
I mean, Google's done search, isn't it?
It has.
It's done. Yeah. Like the idea that you would go into a search engine that's web crawling, that has some form of cached set of recent searches to accelerate response, that internet search architecture is over.
And the evolution of it is to go away from search engines into answer engines. So this is what certainly what I use.
I don't want to derail your Anthropic conversation, but just like when you see things happen in real time, you realise it's done, isn't it?
Yeah. So the essay that he wrote, Machines of Loving Grace, was a sort of a paean to all of the positive impacts that AI could have within the world. And I think he lists off, I think it's 5 big areas. There's the advances in medical technology, the advances that can be made in mental well-being, the advances that can be made by just taking the friction out of everyday life, understanding economics, and I think he lists he lists a couple of other areas of advancement. But you finding your car park or having an agent interrogates the internet, go to the NCP website, find out where there are spaces that are likely to be available as you drive in, and send that information to you, and it goes straight to your sat-nav as you're driving in. Well, if everyone's doing that, life is going to be much less full of friction than it is at the moment, particularly if you're a large van driver. So these small advances in just in our ability to be able to get around and do things with less friction will be amazing. Mm-hmm. That won't say that we won't go on and complain about other different things, of course, but I think you finding a parking space is a good example of how small incremental advances in how everyday life is conducted through that personal assistant who's an agent on your behalf will just make life better for everybody.
It's an immaterial example where a workflow can kind of be automated. Are you you're the work that you're doing at the moment, do you enjoy that work? Because every era of technology I've worked in, I've really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of been a step change in performance, functionality, cost reduction, not so enjoyable, but it is enjoyable if you're, I feel as though this leap there are real ethical considerations, like never be moving from disk drives to flash drives, moving from on-premises to the cloud, moving from, Ethernet to gigabit Ethernet. I mean, these are pretty boring transitions, but the cornerstones of business.
Yeah.
This one's different. It feels very different to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I think that there is something quite profound about the world that we're going to be moving towards reasonably quickly. The ethical component is one that needs some serious consideration. You want your large language models to be free from bias. So we're very interested in the data that it's been trained upon. The quality of that data will have an impact on the responses of the model. Of course it will. So where does it come from? Is it true? How's it been written? Then the questions such as are we infringing copyright on people who've produced that information in the first place? What sort of guide rails are we going to put around these models to prevent people from asking questions and getting information which we wouldn't necessarily want to have in the public domain? I think there's a lot of concern about chemical, biological, nuclear information falling into the wrong hands, and how do you prevent models from providing information back on those topics, and the list goes on, right? So how do you get models to respond in a way that is compelling, conversational, not arrogant, doesn't push a political point of view, listens, gives you accurate responses, doesn't repeat itself, uses simple language? All of those things are, when it comes to looking at the interpretability of the model and understanding what dials you need to turn in order to get the best response out of it, so you have models that are acting in an ethical way, is quite a difficult task. Inherently, the weights of the model in the feed-forward layers, where the knowledge is held, if you want to describe it that way, is inherently hard to unpick. To look at what's actually happening in each of those layers. There are different mechanisms that have been made to make sort of model outputs more interpretable, and I think there's some research going on at the moment in terms of mechanistic interpretability, so using other techniques, machine learning techniques, in order to try and peek into the black box to understand what's going on. So I think we're very much at the start of this process of looking at how to get models to act in the way that we would like them to act, inherently from first principles. And while we're still in that position, and from here forward, I think it's good practice to bring the guide rails and the controls and the governance and the legal framework in place in order to make sure that we're getting the outcomes what we want from these model providers baked into where we're going. So you'll have seen on the internet where there's, we've got the proponents of AI and the detractors of AI and doomers. I think the risks are significantly big enough that we would want to be cautious about how we go forward. But going back to your conversation, keep in mind the prize of how much better life could be with the power of these AI models at our fingertips in a way that's safe and controllable.
How is safety and controllability retained? So if I was an organisation looking at now at deploying chatbots, I don't even like the term chatbots, but some form of conversational AI interface with my clients or potential clients, there seems to have been a number of high-profile cases where we've had hallucinations and odd behaviours. How do you ensure that doesn't happen?
I think you might be referring to the incident with DPD. I think that I'm not quite sure when it happened. It feels fairly recent because of the speed with which these things change. But I believe a customer was able to interact with a large language model and prompted it in a way that it produced insulting content, and that was as a result of I think some checks and some testing had not been done when a new release had come out for that particular model. I think DPD had to move quite quickly in order to make sure that didn't happen again. the way that we would go about it at the moment is the way in which the model is prompted is the key interface. So there's at that stage, we want to be very careful about filtering out malicious intent or malicious content.
What happens if somebody's malicious to it? Like, is the engagement the prompt? So when I call up DPD or the thing and I'm speaking to the AI, if I abuse it, is it learning to abuse me?
No, I think you can control all of that. So firstly, we wouldn't put I don't think it would be wise. I don't think it would be wise looking at it through the lens of keeping control of the system to have live learning. You might want to retain data at some point or another so that you can make...
You want some conversational memory, but what you don't want is memory of abuse.
You use that... Well, perhaps you would want that, right? Because you would want to prompt the model to be able to respond to that in an appropriate way. But you can do that through the back-end system prompts. And this is the beauty of these things, right? So if you're giving it a system prompt that says, if the customer uses abusive language, then please respond in the following manner. The other things that we can do to make sure that the information that's passed back is correct, grounded in truth, is to use a system called Retrieval Augmented Generation, which I'm sure you've come across before. I think some of your previous guests have talked about it, but that's simply a way of providing a sort of an indexed catalogue of information, if you like, which the model can pick from to find the answer that's most suitable. So in any form of sort of querying a knowledge base, you get the question in, you can then use the model to search for the content that is closest in terms of semantic similarity to the question, package up that information along with the question that the user asked in the first place, then pass it to the model in order to turn that into something conversational that can be passed back to the customer. So in that system, you've got opportunities, firstly at the front end, to filter out any malicious content, and you're looking for things that might constitute prompt poisoning, for example, and then filter the content that comes back to the customer to make sure that nothing inappropriate is going out of the system. And I'm sure in DPD's instance, they would have had something like that in place that failed.
So there's almost two. There's a data failure, and there's an AI execution failure, isn't there? You could argue in some ways. I think there's a big philosophical challenge for human beings coming, and it relates very much to: are we prepared to be data-driven and allow these systems to interact based on data?
Yeah.
Because you may not like what the data says. You may not like it. And an example could be, taking a delivery example, saying that, the most amount of delivery driver thefts occur when it's in this postcode or it's at this time of day, it's during this period of the year. So the data may say we're not prepared to deliver to that postcode the week before Christmas during the hours of midnight and 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Because the data says it's an 80% chance within that frame of execution the van's gonna get someone's gonna steal something from the van.
Yeah.
Now, the question I have is that if DPD or that organisation are looking to leverage machine learning and AI to optimise their business and reduce the amount of insurance they have to do due to losses of parcels, are they prepared to say, the AI say, we are not going to deliver to that location during that time and that period of year? Because if I was living there, I'd be like, well, I don't steal parcels.
Yeah.
I need to get, it's the week before Christmas, I need this gift delivered, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go with someone else.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to claim I'm being unfairly biased. But the data is itself saying something that is showing a certain propensity for a risk.
Yeah.
So the question is, are we prepared a machine? Are we prepared for a machine to make that decision based on data?
So no, I don't think I would be happy for like in this instance, we would be asking a reasoning model prompted to say maximize profit and minimize loss. Right, and so the unintended consequence of that is that a whole postcode is unserved by the service that we provide because there's a high incidence of crime in that area. Well, it stands to reason, right, that the human intelligence that we would apply to that is that not everybody who lives in that postcode is part of the criminal gang that's stealing from us, the delivery service. So a different treatment would potentially need to be provided. And we'd look at it closely. We'd still want to serve our loyal customers who quite rightly are asking us to deliver parcels to them. So that would,
interesting.
So that I think for me would be an opportunity to inquire more
to go deeper
into why is that happening.
Interesting.
And
so if you have
another
generalistic trends, you shouldn't just immediately react with a reaction. The action is to go deeper into the data and understand at a more granular level.
If you want to expand this out, right?
Because this could be an area, this could be the density of carbon fibre on an aeroplane wing under certain temperatures flying over it. This could be all sorts of different points that we are using. But my point is that are we prepared to give that to the machines to decide?
I think we have to become more. All of us need to become more literate with data and what it means to be data-led, and how it's incumbent upon us all to educate ourselves on what it is exactly that we're looking at here in the data and how it should be treated, and be skeptical of what we see, or at least questioning of what we see, to try and understand the next layer of detail in it. If we pass all of these decisions to models, we need to be clear what we're giving up and how that might affect or have unintended consequences with unserved customers and unfairly unserved customers from certain areas or demographics or postcodes or however you want to slice it. So, yeah, I think if your point is we're going to have to be, all of us, as part of the changes in how work is going to change going forward. Now we have these forms of AI assisting agents that might assist us, and machine learning tools in general that is going to provide us with better information. We need to know how to consume it.
And it's the transition. Is there a transition of power occurring here, do you think, Huw, from humans to machines? Has it even already happened? We all sit at the red traffic light and we go on the green traffic light. Who's controlling traffic? Not a pragmatic set of drivers, because they can't be trusted. So we have a coloured light system to create a simple model of interaction at a complicated road junction. In some ways, we've already handed over our responsibility to a set of machines that are applying rules through a common language, green, amber, red. Are we at this era now where we're relaxing into a much greater, deeper level of machine-led control?
So I think that there is something to what you're saying there. The way that I would think about it is that all societies operate by a series of rules, whether they be written down or unwritten. And what the technology is offering us is the opportunity to move human attention further up the value chain to things that are more interesting and demand what we bring to the table in terms of human creativity, a different set of problems. So worrying about whether I'm going to crash into the next car that hurtles its way through the crossroads is something I don't want to waste my time on. Isn't it great that we've got traffic lights? Well, data wrangling all of this information into the right format, and then going away and conducting the experiments, and then coming back with the data and having a view of what the conclusions might be as an early pass. Well, that's a far better use of the time. Like all of the grunt work has been done by the machines, and so we're then left there to draw the conclusions and imagine what the experiments would be. So the bit I think the bit where the inflection point that you're talking about is the bit where we have systems models that are sufficiently capable that they can come up with their own intent. I think
and execute on that intent.
Correct. Right. So I think one of the things I've heard recently is that a line will be crossed when we have models that can do that, but then also they have a good understanding of model development and so can improve themselves, which I'm sure will be coming at some point later on down the line.
How far are we away from AI with intent and self?
Like, how long is a piece of string? If everything continues going at the pace it's going at the moment, and we continue to observe I hesitate to call it a law, the scaling laws, but certainly the adding more data, adding more compute, adding more layers to the model, bigger is better, has turned out to be true, and that's why so much investment is going into these things, and we keep hearing about the next AGI being around the corner. I wouldn't want to speculate. I think he said just about to speculate. I think we will definitely need to.
What do you say? I'm not going to offend you by saying this. Is basically
well, yes, exactly. Yes.
Go, no,
with the greatest of respect.
Yeah, there's no respect at all. What's the speculation?
Yeah. I think that we're going to continue to see great strides made over the next couple of years, and I think we'll get more capable models that can do more reasoning more effectively. And I think over the course of the last couple of years, we've gone from graduate level capability to PhD to professor. What's next? Nobel laureate, expert in your pocket.
Where's this occurring? I'm fortunate enough to get up to Bletchley Park soon to speak to some of the people there and get into the origin of encryption and all that sort of stuff, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
But looking forwards, we're seeing huge development strides in China and Asia.
Yeah.
Around some phenomenal, video technology, AI technology, the sophistication and capability of consumer grade products out of Asia are phenomenal. The US is going through somewhat political transition, it feels, which is, I don't know whether that's taken their eye off the ball in terms of just developmental progress. There's a lot of pseudo-political techno. You don't believe that? Where do you think these big AI strides are going to come from? Is it Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, or are we going to see new emerging big tech brands on the global scale?
So I think one of the sort of more prominent AI researchers, Fei-Fei, it talks about large world models, and so the notion here is that language is a function of our capability, but it's only one of those things. Jan LeCun, I think, if on any of his podcasts recently, he's famous for saying that current models have the intelligence of a house cat. Probably insulting a house cats. I think what we're moving towards is this idea that there is, you, as well as using language, you see, you hear, you feel, you have a sense of where you are in the world. You have a picture of the way of the physics of human existence plays out, and a whole load of other sensory information. Which we haven't even started to explore, or I haven't started to explore. Bringing all of that together into a sense of thinking is probably going to be sort of the next leap. So when we've got models that are taking sensory information from touch sensors, for example, and incorporating that into their world models.
I haven't heard about this. So LWMs, large world models.
Yeah. Fei-Fei's private company, I think, is exploring that at the moment. So it's extending multimodality.
Yes. So OpenAI's AGI is just a development of the cognitive capability behind the LLM.
Well, I think they're using multimodal. So I think what they're bringing together is audio and video and language. But it's still only a that's still only a proportion of all of the sensory experience that, you know, even a small child learns to cope with in the first days in the world. So the expanding out all of those different components. Steven Pinker, if you haven't come across him, is a cognitive linguist. I think it's probably the best way to describe him. Talks about Mentalese. It's sort of in cognitive philosophy. Is there an underlying method of communication within the brain itself that moves between language, or puts language, that sits beneath language as a way of thinking about concepts? When you think about things, you know, you can picture something in your mind's eye. If I asked you to think about Homer Simpson, you could probably hear the way that Homer Simpson is talking, you know, in his voice. You can tell me how it feels to be on the beach. You can tell me what a hot summer day feels like, crossing all of those different sensations. You ask a model to do that, and it's just replaying what it feels, what the language says that's like. It's not really a true description of the experience because it has no way of experiencing those things. So, you know, as we add more data sources, or as I say we, right? So as the hyperscalers add more data inputs into these models and give them a more complete world view and an understanding of how, you know, what happens in the real world when you interact with these things, I think that's when we'll start approaching more AGI-like capabilities.
This is absolutely fascinating. I'm being schooled here, Huw, and I'm really appreciating and enjoying it. I have not had a single conversation that's evolved beyond this idea that we have, you know, data that we're driving language from. This idea. I mean, even with the podcast, I had the music designed because I know that oral stimulation, you know, is as important as visual, like the sounds, the music. You know, what we're talking about is that multi-sensory model.
I mean, it's a fascinating area.
It is.
I mean, if you want to look at the notion of free will, for example, you know, even a sort of surface level treatment of this will sort of take you straight to the point that the part of you that you think of as yourself, the talking part of you, the language using part of you, where you do the thinking, that's definitely not, even from a physical perspective of the brain, that's only a proportion of it. So what's the rest of it doing? There are like, we have no ability to be able to reach further into our own minds to understand what's going on underneath the level of which our conscious witness, the voice in your head, is telling you what's happening. So we're literally telling stories to ourselves as we go through our lives, explaining away the actions and the emotions that emerge from somewhere deeper underneath in the subconscious. The conscious part of the brain is very much smaller than, you know, the size, the surface area of the brain that you would consider to be part of your subconscious.
Like the dark web. The dark web is...
well, hopefully not, right? But, so certainly in terms of us being able to, like, consciously interpret what's happening. I've been reading recently about like creativity and what you can do to stimulate creativity. It's called the Creative Act, and he talks about gathering ideas and letting them percolate through your subconscious, and then they start to come together maybe as you're on a walk or you're in the shower.
Or they emerge subconsciously.
Yes, exactly that, right? So that's part of our experience. All of the data gathering and the thinking is sort of literally going on underneath the layer of your consciousness, but it does emerge as you're thinking deeply about topics. And I think that, like, so it will be with models.
I do believe, in fact, I know there's a sense that occurs between humans in proximity that you don't get. And I think it's been lacking since COVID. A lot of people on video calls, a lot of things. That sense of connectedness and subconscious cohesion that occurs within people in groups, in tight teams, in groups of people. I know that nobody wants to go back to the office because they spend time with the family and all that. I get all that. But there's something missing in business, I believe. And I was having a chat with a very good friend of mine, a guy called Andy Renshaw, this morning. Absolute gentleman. known him a long time. And we were very quickly at the core, we were reminiscing times back maybe 10, 12 years ago where we were operating in teams, we had banter, we were having a pint after work. I know that these are like quite cliches and we all live in healthier lives now. And,
Allegedly.
His exact point was, you may not be having the 2 or 3 pints of alcohol and your body's benefiting, but the joy and laughter and relaxation that came with being with your mates in the pub, you've lost. And that could be a net negative on your longevity and enjoyment of life, which I thought was it was a much more complex conversation. But my point was this idea
you were at the 3rd pint when that was.
No, it was this morning.
This morning.
Yeah. But did you see my point?
I do see your point.
That proximity and connectiveness, maybe unconsciously something's going on there that feeds
with all of these things, right? So humans have evolved over millions of years, and certainly our recent past is really quite short in comparison to that evolutionary process, and we have evolved to be social creatures. I think your chances of survival on your own are fairly low. So back in the day, a couple of thousand years ago, perhaps your chances against the bears and the mammoths weren't as great if you were on your own as opposed to being in a team, in a family group. And I think there is an inherent need for social contact because we are social creatures.
In the business context, certainly around innovation and ideas, I've found that in front of a whiteboard, another cliche, was a very compelling way of...
Yeah, it's because I think we're hardwired to interact with each other in that way. When we're looking for innovative solutions, there's far more information that comes from the physical reality of being in a room with people than you get from just seeing a 2-dimensional render of them on the screen.
When are these large world models expected to emerge? Is there another OpenAI moment that's going to occur in the next 2 or 3 years where this thing is visual, sound, audio, sensory?
I mean, certainly you wouldn't bet against them producing something over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, would you, given the rate and pace of change at the moment?
Because Apple's Vision Pro was kind of an attempt, but they've backed out of that completely. They were saying the screen technology is not high enough resolution to actually do real work. The device is too expensive. I think Apple have basically got loads of unsold stock and they've stopped manufacturing the Vision Pro because of just the lack of commercial success and traction.
Yeah.
It kind of tells you maybe people aren't ready for that.
Potentially.
And it's a very isolating device which goes against this idea of...
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, perhaps there are a whole load of other practical issues that might manifest themselves first. So, the chip technology that powers all of this comes out of Taiwan, and the machines that make the lithograph machines that print the GPUs on which all of this is powered are hugely expensive bits of machinery in themselves. There are logistic chains that are exceedingly intertwined, global and complex, that it'd be very easy for something to go wrong at any stage of that in terms of GPU production. And that's just one example of the physical world intervening on what we might want to be able to produce over the course of the next 10 years or so. There might not be enough data, there might not be enough compute. The way in which the models work at the moment, the generative pre-trained transformers, that architecture of model might not be suitable for other different types of information, like great for language, but it seems to be working for vision and for audio as well. But does that necessarily hold true for other sources of sensory information? I don't know. What happens if we do reach a point where more doesn't equal better? Then we're going to be in the process of looking for different gains through different methodologies at that stage.
Okay, can I tell you, your approach and perspective is so thoughtful and human orientated. I wasn't expecting that for somebody who's leading technology to have this level of human thoughtfulness around its implementation and impact is amazing. I think that the customers of the organisation that they're going to be on I feel safe. They're going to be on a safe journey.
It takes us back to, well, firstly, thank you, but it does take us back to the start of our conversation. I think there is going to be a premium on trust. If you're interacting with an organisation through its chatbot, and that organisation is doing something for you, keeping your money safe, advising you on medical appointments, reminding you to take prescriptions, offering you insurance, providing you with something to do with your children's schooling, right? You're not going to mess around with something that you don't trust, or is going to be feeding you misinformation. You're going to want to know that information is correct, and I think that is what people will be paying for. The fact that these amazing tools are providing people with the capability to produce all of these interesting and wonderful stuff and express themselves and their creativity by making videos, creating memes, making things up. That's fun and it's interesting, but we have to discriminate between something that is to be engaged with lightly and serious applications where the impact on your life could be profound if it goes wrong.
Of course.
So this is what you pay for, right? This is why I put my money in this bank. This is why I have my mortgage with this provider. This is why I go to this medical institution for them to provide me with my care.
But the thing
this is where I go to for my news, right?
Totally, and it's back to trust.
Yes,
but also what I haven't quite seen yet, and I believe I'm part of and trying to drive forward, is conversational AI chatbots, whatever you want to call them. They're an opportunity to encapsulate your brand values and your actual business values. Yeah. So say if you're an investment company, probably this is going to be a bad example, but you've had great successes from conservative investment in commercial properties or whatever the example is, that if your chatbot, which I hate using, so conversational AI, is trained on
agent.
If your digital agent, AI agent is trained on data where you've found success as a business, and your very brand value is around conservatism, safe investing, whatever, the actual agentic AI will represent you in every engagement.
Yeah.
And if you're a bit more of a volatile investor who goes high ups, high downs, which is very much part of some investment schemes, and they know the higher risk profiles, that also is captured in that agent.
Yeah.
So there is an ability. Like I had this dystopian view that we're going to normalize everything to this kind of mid-spectrum, normalized AI-driven, whereas actually the AI behavior, if trained on the data, can be an accurate and dependable and repeatable representation of your organizational values.
Yeah, we're providing you with the truth, and we're behaving in a way that represents the value of the company, and the manner in which the agent responds to you reflects the everyday habits of how we interpret the situations where our values are allowed to come through. I think to bringing it back into like tangible things, these are literally the guide rails that we put around the implementation of an agent to a use case or a chatbot to a use case. Should it be involved in this particular customer journey or not? And then when you get into the wonderful companies that are building these things, I think I read something the other day about constitutional feedback. Reinforcement learning through human feedback is the point at which in model training you've got the raw output for the model, and then we're testing its behaviors against a series of questions designed to elicit the answers that we would expect, and test at the edge of that all of the areas of risk that we would want to mitigate against. And the answers that the model produces is then assessed by a human assessor, and to give it the thumbs up or the thumbs down, whether this is a good response or not. And then that is back propagated through the system to adjust the weights of the model, so that you're providing something that is attuned. I think the RLHF aligns with this concept of a constitutional reinforcement learning, where you have a model which is primed to assess the responses against a constitution that you have written for it, for the way that the model that you're training would respond. So these are the values and the habits that represent your company's culture and values.
So it's output quality, any ethics, any specific. Fascinating. And is that real time? Those, or are they kind of offline? Like, where are we with that technology?
Well, I think if you want for a chatbot to be useful, it has to give you an answer straight away, or at least it has to tell you that it's going to go and take some time to go and figure it out. I think the way that I would like to optimize our chat service is, if you've got the worst phone and you're stood in the middle of the worst, most distant field, muddiest field in Cumbria, where there's little or no reception, we should be serving you with a response that comes back in less than a second. If it's a complex process, then we should be telling you we're going to go and take some time to think about that, and we'll let you know when this is going to happen. But yeah, if your question is do we want the model to respond in real time, imbued with our values? Then yes, I think it has to be, and it has to be part of the training process of the model itself. And then you've got another opportunity using techniques like Retrieval Augmented Generation to provide information back that has been human vetted and aligns with your values, and the content is correct and up to date.
The conversation we've moved through philosophy, biology, a lot of the human elements. I get this sense that you have a very disciplined, data-driven approach to the application of this technology. It's done in a very pragmatic way, and you certainly do deep research in the aspects before you're bringing this technology. I've learned a lot today. But you are in a situation where you're redefining and evolving this human business, this human machine interface.
Yeah.
And I think we know that relationships can go well, they can go bad, they can be volatile. That dynamic has a great opportunity, but as we know with the DPD and others, when things go wrong, they go badly wrong. My question is, as we're moving, inevitably driving high speed into the application of LLMs, WMs and beyond, do you believe we're moving to a utopia or a dystopia?
So I think that the utopian version of the world is aligned with the do no harm. And I think you look at all of the regulation that has come out both from the States and the EU and what we've done in the UK about the pragmatic application of this technology and the risks that we're willing to take and where we're willing to apply it. I think these are good things because it sets a high bar for those competing for our attention and our pounds or dollars in the development of these systems. We live in a commercial world. They are driving, the application of this technology not for its own sake, but because it provides profit for companies. So rather than a race to the bottom, we need to set a race to the top and set the highest standards. And if we're going to live in a world where we pay good money for trusted sources of information, then I think you need to have the guide rails and the regulations in place, the ethical standards, to ensure that we're all pushing towards a top quality product at the end of the day. So in that sense, if you look at the various acts that have been implemented, I think these are good things, and they are applying the pressure in the right way to ensure that we'll end up with useful, positive systems that are a universal good for society in general. I think we'll see where we'll feel the biggest impact probably is in the medical sphere. Helping cure diseases which are currently, are currently impossible to help with, various cancers or whatever. I think we're living in a very interesting time where using AI will really, I think the phrase is 10x our ability to be able to combat these things. Look at what's been done with AlphaFold in understanding how proteins fold together and what that will do for drug design. So in that sense, yes, I think that we are heading towards a more positive view of the future with this technology. However, the world is full of bad people who want to do bad things. And I think we have to constantly guard against the applications of this technology for nefarious purposes, and making sure that big organisations, governments, and the providers of these models in the first place are constantly on guard against the inappropriate application of the technology. Is something that is going to be a constant battle, and not one that they'll win every single time. So I think we will see aspects of both, right? So was it Albert Huxley who wrote what was the book about the Utopia? There's a character in that book that complains because everything is perfect and there's nothing to push back against, and so his life is deprived of meaning. Well, I don't think that would be true either, right? So I think what that will mean is that the use of this technology will push us further up the value chain, where we'll start doing more difficult things with it, and allow people to be really creative. So is it a utopia? Is it a dystopia? It's neither. It's what we've got at the moment, but with humans further up the chain.